Well, hello, Angie, and welcome to the Inner Beauty Code.
Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here and so excited for the listeners to hear all about brain mapping and how it can help you and what it can do for them. So I would love to hear your explanation of all things brain mapping.
Oh my gosh, yes. So my name is Angie, and I am the Vice President of Business Development for BrainCode Centers. I also have been a clinician for many years. So not only do I talk about it, from kind of a business development standpoint, but also I have done a lot of neurofeedback and brain mapping personally. I also have treated many people personally. So kind of the clinician and, management side. BrainCode Centers is a brain mapping and neurofeedback company. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with QEEG brain mapping, it is basically a neurological scan of the brain to see exactly what the brain is producing via microvoltage. And we're looking at it through kind of the lens of brain waves because all humans are capable of producing the same brain waves. So we all have delta, deep, slow sleep, theta drifting into sleep, alpha is a receptor, beta should be clean energy, and high beta is fight or flight. So we're truly looking at what people's brains are producing neurologically through wave activity, which show us everything. Really, everything will show itself to us in a brain map. Anxiety, depression, ADD, trauma, PTSD, brain injury, sleep issues, all of those things manifest themselves to us. So that's really how we start, is with a brain map to see exactly what is going on. It really is like a visual form of grace for people to understand exactly why I experience what I experience, why my brain is doing what it's doing. So we start there, and then we do a full the scan, a map review to talk through it, and then the actual treatment that people do is called neurofeedback, and it really is operant conditioning of the brain. It's reward-based training. We are teaching the brain to create new neural pathways to serve that person better. So it really is to treat things like anxiety and like depression, to increase focus and motivation, to improve sleep, to improve cognition. So really, I think as a culture, a lot of times we tend to focus neck down, and our brain works a lot like a muscle and is able to be trained kind of like a muscle. So we're really working on optimizing kind of your best asset, which is your brain.
There's so much information there that I have a million questions to ask you. So basically, since everyone's brain is different, and so are you speaking in terms of, most people nowadays have heard of neuroplasticity. So is it just retraining your brain or to create different pathways with your behaviors and your thoughts and your habits? Or is that what you see, like where people are lacking, what's inactive with the electrodes, right? So like a helmet that you wear with electrodes on your head that tracks people's like brain processing, the electro, what was it called?
Oh, no, totally. Yeah. I can get into all that. You're right. Cause it feels really heavy, right? It is a lot of information. It's really tech heavy. It can feel kind of intimidating. So we do have in-person centers. So people come to us. We have offices in Denver, Tulsa, Texas. Then we also have a global remote program. So literally we have people across the world doing neurofeedback with us. So yes, the process is to have electrodes on the head. The electrodes are not putting any electrical stimulus into the brain. So this is not some weird shock anything, right? Nothing's going in. The electrodes are only picking up information. They're kind of monitoring and reading what the brain is doing. And then through exterior forms of stimulus, visual, auditory, tactile, basically the brain is being given reward only when it's producing the wave activity that's favorable to us. So literally, kind of in layman's of terms, we are rewiring the brain. We're teaching the brain to create new neural pathways. And really, we have neural pathways to everything, right? When we wake up in the morning, we don't have to relearn how to walk, how to talk, how to eat, right? We already know how to do those things. We've learned them as a baby, committed them to permanency, and now we run over those same patterns every day. Equally as deeply ingrained to the neural pathways, to the things that we want, the walk, talk, eat, kind of the good stuff, are neural pathways to things that are less favorable. Anxiety, depression, trauma, just not serving us well. So with neurofeedback, we're not erasing old neural pathways. we are physiologically creating new ones and then teaching the brain to only take the new ones that we've created. And we're doing it with that reward training.
And so this would be a process. So someone would continue to do this over time to change the pathways. It's not just like a one-time thing. Just I want to go through the process of exactly like what someone do. And then I actually want to know examples of different ways that this has helped, because I know you treat ADHD and depression and things like that. So say someone comes into you with ADHD and they want to improve how their brain functions or their cognitive processing, improve their memory, improve their attention. So how would that work? Just a little example.
Oh, absolutely. It is a process, right? And sometimes we live in kind of the Amazon Prime world where we order it, we want it tomorrow, right? We want to make it happen. How soon can I get it? And the reality is that neurofeedback is not like Xanax, right? You're not going to take it and it's immediately going to, flood and all the things. It's like building muscle. It's like going to the gym, right? It's going to take a minute to build that pathway and to ultimately get there. And it probably took 30, 40 years for us to get where we are. It's not going to happen overnight. So it is a process and kind of a series of treatments. I would say most people, if you're doing remote neurofeedback, it's going to be about a 6-month process, maybe even up to 9 months. This is the remote headset that we utilize. So super user-friendly. People put the headset on their head. They have an app on their phone so they can utilize it from home. If someone is doing in person with us, they might do around like 40 treatments, right? Where they're actually coming in office and training with us. But you're right, it is a progression of treatments. And we're not necessarily working on one symptomology, per session. So it's not, okay, today we're working on anxiety and tomorrow we're working on ADHD and tomorrow we're working on, depression, as that's kind of the medication mentality, right? That, okay, I take a med for my ADD and I take a med for my anxiety. All those things actually in the brain are like this. They're super interwoven and interconnected. So it's more we're working on areas of the brain. Today, we might be working on the prefrontal cortex. Next week, we might be working on the temporal lobes, parietal, occipital, as your anxiety might be coming from 10 different areas in the brain. Your ADD, ADHD, if you have a true pattern for that, might be coming from overactivity of alpha on the back temporal lobe. So it's really more we're working on areas of the brain versus just symptoms.
Good to know. So I just was reading over the different things that you guys work on. And so it's basically improving overall function of certain areas of the brain. So to treat like maybe a multitude of different things that you might be struggling with would improve and be less active, or you would not experience those symptoms that you get from having ADHD or being depressed. You might feel better because your brain overall is functioning better.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We're looking to optimize the brain holistically, right? I mean, our brains, number one, are our absolute best assets, right? That if you do not have a well-functioning brain, life is going to be tough, right? So we definitely want to make sure that your best asset is working so strongly for you. And if anything, I would say that is helping people to be more authentically who they are, right? That, I don't think someone was created to be an incredibly depressed person, or I don't think someone was made to, have panic attacks weekly or daily, right? That if we can make the brain work better for you, and unlike medication, it's not going to have side effects like medication. So great that I'm not anxious, but gosh, now I have a hard time experiencing joy, right? Great that I'm not depressed, but now I have insomnia. It's not going to work like that. It doesn't have side effects like medication. So if anything, I would say that it really is helping you be more of who you were meant to be.
Perfect. And just talking about all these symptoms and then the solutions that a lot of times Western medicine, not to criticize doctors, but a lot of the quick fix is to put people on medication, and just knowing that there are alternatives to creating a healthier lifestyle and just feeling better is incredible. And like you said, being authentically you, I think there are a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of depression and lack of sleep. And because you're getting less sleep, you're not sleeping well, you probably experience symptoms of depression, and then all the other things that you're treating, ADHD and anxiety. and mood disorders and memory and everything that people could be experiencing usually requires or is people are usually given medicine for these things. And knowing that you can improve your overall life by improving your brain is super helpful. And it's interesting that we're talking because I was actually talking to my mom that I want to do this. So now that I know that you offer this remotely too, and that I can have my own
headset. Yep. Your own. Yep.
The headset.
All the electrodes are already embedded into it. It's so cool. I was just going to say, Rachel, I love what you said, that not to criticize Western medicine, right? Because there is a time and a place for medication. And I believe that medication for many people can save lives, right? And can really get us out of a tough, dark place. But I would argue that the purpose of medication is to be a short-term fix to find a long-term solution. And unfortunately, as a culture, we tend to use it as the long-term solution, right? And we just use it forever and we increase our dosage and we just kind of are then in this cycle of medication management. And we at BrainCode Centers, we are all about getting to the root and getting to the why and changing it there, right? Versus how do we just mask symptoms? We're not about that.
Mm-hmm.
How do we dig up and figure out what's actually going on and what's not serving you well, and changing that so that you can have long-term health and long-term success.
One question I have, I know like EEG. So what's the difference between it says quantitative EEG versus just a regular EEG machine? What's the difference there?
Yeah, it's kind of the way that the scan shows up and the way that we look at it, right? So a regular EEG someone might have if they're struggling with epilepsy or something like that, So an EEG is just generally utilized for other purposes, which is totally fine. I have people come in with a regular EEG that I will look at as well. We still need the QEEG because that is showing us quantitatively what's happening in the brain. So all of the neurological and electrical wave activity happening. Same thing that, like Dr. Amen, who is absolutely amazing at the Amen clinics. He's doing SPECT imaging. Also a brain scan, but it's a blood flow scan. So I'll have people come in with that going, hey, can you use this? It's not that I won't take it into consideration. It's not what I need to develop the protocols for our program, right? I train NFL players who come in and are like, hey, Angie, I had a totally normal MRI, but I'm having all of these post-concussive symptoms. I feel like crap and what's going on? And they have a totally abnormal QEEG. It's not that the MRI was wrong, but they don't have a skull fracture or a hematoma or a brain bleed. It's just looking for something totally different.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Out of curiosity, so can you give some examples within ethical boundaries here, but just examples of ways that this different clients that this has helped, like different issues that people were having, or do a lot of people come to you maybe not suffering from something like having major depression, but maybe just wanting to maximize their performance or their cognition or whatever it might be that they come in to ask and you help for?
Yes. I mean, gosh, I've been, doing neurofeedback for 10 something years, right? And I could give you literally hundreds of stories of success. I can also talk personally, right? This is not only something that I do and that I've committed my life to. I've also done a lot of neurofeedback personally. And at the age of 19, I actually had a skull fracture, traumatic brain injury that left me in a walker for a while. I was dealing with a lot of cognitive deficits. And even 10 years down the road, after I relearned to walk and worked through a lot of things, I had really horrible anxiety, panic attacks, very hypervigilant all the time, really overstimulated in crowds, terrible insomnia, that at that point I was kind of told, hey, this just might be as good as it's going to get, right? Fortunately, I was like, no, I don't accept that answer. The it's as good as it's going to get answer does not fly with me. And honestly, neurofeedback kind of found me through my master's program and through some connections. And after I probably did around 50 sessions of neurofeedback. I can honestly say I hardly remember what anxiety feels like. I haven't had a panic attack since. And it's been maybe 5 years since I've had a panic attack since I did neurofeedback, did a lot of neurofeedback personally. insomnia has, I can't even, I probably 70, 80% improvement, that my sleep has been impacted so greatly. So, I mean, I treat people all day long and will give you other success stories. My personal success story, I mean, I live with that every day, that has absolutely critically changed my life. That if you're not sleeping, you're not functioning well, right? And, so that greatly impacted me. I can think of a really interesting and niche population that we treat is actually people who have been adopted. I say people because not only kids, but adults who, went through adoption and still experienced a lot of trauma from that. Reactive attachment disorder, hard time attaching emotionally and cognitively, and especially with a kid, right? Or somebody who maybe was adopted from birth, right? Does not necessarily have cognitive memory of that trauma. So traditional talk therapy and trauma therapy isn't going to do a whole lot because they don't have cognitive memory of it. And neurofeedback is kind of a backdoor way into being able to treat that. I said earlier, we work with NFL players. We have worked with a lot of professional athletes who golf and tennis and whatnot, who don't necessarily have experienced a lot of concussions, but really need to be at the top of their game, right? That, even in the last, I would say 10 years, we've experienced that, especially with professional athletes. Actually, the Netflix documentary, The Quarterback, came out, and there's a quarterback on there talking about doing neurofeedback and really benefiting from neurofeedback, that it's kind of this little like pocket ace, right? That if you're training your brain, you're going to be faster and better and quicker. Let's say you're a professional golfer and you get to hole 18 and you're 15 strokes down and you hit a horrible tee shot. You got about a 10-minute walk to your crappy tee shot. Are you a head case, right? In that 10 minutes, have you lost it? And we watch it, right? We watch it on TV. We watch these guys literally crumple and, then, dink around the course and lose their lead. And we're going, how did that happen? Because they were not brain tough, right? Their bodies were ready. Their brain was not ready for that. Their brain was not trained for that. That's really what we're working on. It is truly making their brain that 1% better every day, so that when you get to a tough situation, your brain is not going to go into fight or flight. It's not going to go into that place of hypervigilance because it's been trained to do something differently.
That is so amazing and so helpful. And I wasn't even thinking about what you do in those terms. I was thinking if someone had an injury or trauma to the brain, because I do jujitsu, and I actually, and I know a lot of athletes in general, even if it's not a super physical contact sport, but there are a lot of people that I do know that do sports where you can get head injuries, or once you get injured and then you have to go back into that situation, or you miss your shot, and that can cause almost like a traumatic experience for you that then going forward can prevent you from performing well because that trauma is still active and keeping you in fight or flight. So that's so interesting to think about it in those terms, even like I said, if you don't necessarily have any head traumas or, severe emotional or mental disorders that you're dealing with. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story, by the way. That's incredible that you were able to overcome that and found neurofeedback, because that sounds like it really helped you, and look how far you've come.
Totally. Yeah. Honestly, absolutely life-changing. And honestly, it is cool because when I treat people, I can talk about it from a very personal standpoint of, how it's impacted me.
Talking about trauma, because I'm getting my master's in psychology, and there's different areas that you can go into, and there's a lot of somatic practitioners coming in, which has to do with the physical body. And when you're talking about trauma, like you mentioned, being adopted or having some kind of whatever kind of trauma you might have experienced in your childhood, after that, I'm so curious to know what someone can do to come to you guys, maybe to get your body out of that fight or flight mode, and even the physical reactions that come from those traumas that you might not even be aware of. Like, how does that show up for people? Like, I'll give you an example. A somatic therapist I went to, but he was saying, even the eye movements of people can be a sign of trauma, like how your eyes look around the room, or a sign of being in fight or flight mode. So can you explain a little bit of how how that can show up prior to working with you guys versus how things are different even physically in the brain from trauma standpoint.
Yes. Well, one, Rachel, congratulations on getting your master's. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
And a lot
Thank
of
you.
work. My master's is in clinical mental health, and then my licensure is in clinical mental health. So I know that freaking grind.
It's horrible.
It's so worth it, but it's a lot of freaking
Yeah.
work, man. It just is. Yes.
So much.
I actually would consider myself more of a Gestalt therapist, which is more of that like somatic body work. So that is
Mhm.
something that I hold, very dear and also do watch for. We have people come in all the time who are struggling with like GI issues, right? Oh my gosh, Angie, I was diagnosed with IBS, all these different things, but they can't find anything wrong, right?
Mhm.
That I've cut out all the dairy and all the gluten. I don't eat anything, and I still just have all these tummy issues. What's going on?
Mhm.
And I heard it could be a brain thing. And then we look at their brain map, and their brain is lit with fast wave activity, right? Your gut is your second brain. Your brain is your second gut, right? Those things are so interconnected. So the
Mhm.
body does give so many indicators of trauma and of fight or flight and of PTSD that aren't necessarily panic attacks. People are like, oh, well, I don't have anxiety. Oh, okay, cool. Let's talk about other things that might be showing up that are indicators of that. And that is the very cool thing about doing a brain map, right? Is that nothing can really hide from us in a brain map. It's going to show itself to us. We're going to be able to see exactly what's going on and then probably deduce the symptomology that you have. And I mean, I've had so many people come in with horrible GI issues, leaving with none, right? And before that, paid so much money to do all of this work on their gut when really it was a brain issue. So you're right that it does show up in so many different ways, but the brain map is going to show us really what's going on.
So another question I have is, so how would that look, though, even like look physically in a brain map?
Yeah.
Say you're experiencing trauma and it could be, I know you can't say, oh, this specific spot in your brain is inactive, so that's why your stomach, not necessarily that, or why you're experiencing gut health issues, but hyperactivity in certain areas of the brain or in brain waves will show you that this could be why you're experiencing X, Y, and Z, like, or a lack of activity or not
Mhm.
like being active in certain areas of your brain can be caused by X, Y, and Z, or could be causing X, Y, and Z. Like, can you explain just kind of how you give people the feedback from their images or their testing that they do with you?
Yeah. So, and that, yeah, the map review that we do is pretty extensive, but we're looking at it through that lens of brain waves, right? Delta deep sleep, theta drifting into sleep, alpha a receptor, beta clean energy, high beta fight or flight. And specifically with that trauma, anxiety, gut issues, whatnot, a lot of times I see a ton of fast wave activity. Beta, high beta, a lot of times I'll see it in the prefrontal cortex, which is going to make us a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more reactive. If you have a lot in the occipital area of your brain, you probably experience it a lot more somatically. Panic attacks, chest tightness. So again, those are both anxiety or kind of fast patterns, two very different experiences of that. So that's probably how I would explain it and break it down for someone. Hey, I'm seeing high beta on the left temporal lobe in this area. This is probably an indicator of this, right? Or, hey, I see a ton of fast wave activity in your prefrontal cortex. Does the word impulsivity resonate with you? Are you a little bit more reactive, right? Something happens, you're quick to respond. I would say 99% of the time people are like spot on. Sometimes it's like, hey, I don't necessarily experience that. I have a lot of fast wave activity in my brain, and one pattern could be an indicator of OCD, right? I don't necessarily experience OCD. I have experienced, anxiety. It hasn't manifested specifically in OCD, but in other people's brains, I see that pattern, and that does ring true for them. So it's not always, 100% this is it. It's a lot of question asking, but it is so cool to go through with people. And I will say, hey, I see this. Do you experience that? Yes, I do. Oh my gosh, where do you see that? And we go through that.
That's so cool. I love it. And I think it would be so helpful for people to be able to maybe understand themselves better through the information that you provide for them, being able to see it actually in their brain. Because I think sometimes people are very unconscious and unaware of things that are happening, that they're not able to even make connections. And then sometimes people are like, I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z, and I know it's not this, but I want to get to the root cause or the source of the problem. And a lot of people, you're right, don't think about their brain, and that when your brain's not functioning, the rest of your body can't either.
Definitely not, and we think about our brain, even, if you think about your brain like a car, right? Even if you have a Ferrari, even if you have a high powered vehicle, that vehicle is not meant to go 100 miles an hour all the time. Or, vice versa, it's not meant to go 20 miles an hour all the time, right? And especially if it is going 100 miles an hour all the time, eventually it's going to break down, right? That, so when people are experiencing brain fog and health issues and cognitive deficits, then we look at their brain and I see these things. It's like, man, yeah, your brain's been going too fast for too long, and eventually it will cost you in other ways, right? That, yeah, now you have tummy issues. Now you have brain fog. Now you're really struggling with memory issues. Of course you are, because your vehicle is not working the way that it should for you. But the beautiful thing about, especially with neuro, there's something that we can do about that, right? It's not just information and then, gosh, what do I do? It's information and here are things that you can do for it, and we give a lot of tangible things as well. We work with a lot of breath work and tapping and, different things like that people can utilize. Although the neurofeedback probably I would say is the main tool that we offer. We do offer a lot of more behavioral things as well.
That's really cool. Would have never guessed that, but that's good to know too, because and I'm so excited about this because I'm like ready to sign up. Like, where can I sign up for this?
Oh my gosh, we have to get you a brain map for sure.
I would love to. Yeah, I'm going to. And I've done breath work before and I've done tapping before with therapists. But I guess, if the machine isn't working well, then no matter what you're doing to like upgrade the software, it's not going to fix the problem. And as I've gotten older, I've noticed too, just like you mentioned, memory, like I feel like I can't remember anything. I feel like I have such brain fog a lot. And especially when I'm sleeping and not eating well, it just has such a more extreme effect on me. So this, you guys, if you're like me and you're experiencing brain fog, and I have anxiety, and I know I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and now doing this program myself, researching and learning about it, this sounds like an amazing solution and tool that would be really helpful for me and everyone else who experiences this stuff.
Oh my gosh. Rachel, I love what you said about like the software. And that's actually an example that I use, that sometimes we feel like we're doing all the things, but ultimately, if you have a computer that is not functioning well, right? And you're doing a ton of software updates, great if it actually needs a software update, right? That's so great. If it has a hardware issue, the software update's never going to touch that. Right. And so that really is what neurofeedback is getting into the hardware and really addressing it on that level versus that kind of behavioral software level.
Okay. So Angie, one question I do have about trauma. So I think people are becoming more and more open to the idea of trauma and its effects, not only on our mental health, but also our physical bodies. So because you are so experienced with the brain and especially with neurofeedback, what are some things that you noticed when traumas go unaddressed, and what actually happens to the brain physically or to the body physically that you've noticed if people do not address these issues or do not try to work on improving their brains and their overall well-being?
Yeah. Gosh, Rachel, that is so true. And especially in kind of the counseling world, we talk about big T trauma, little t trauma. Ultimately, everybody has experienced trauma, right? That's just the reality. And I would say some people, their brains are maybe more equipped to deal with it. It also kind of depends on the type of trauma, right? Earlier developmental trauma, our brain kind of develops around that versus if you have trauma as an adult where your brain is already fully developed, right? especially if we have earlier developmental trauma. There's an amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it does talk about neurofeedback some, but it talks about how our bodies literally hold trauma, and we experience that in different ways. Some people that's insomnia, some people that's attachment issues, right? I talk to a lot of people who are like, gosh, I have a lot of issues with dating. I have a lot of issues with attaching to people in a really healthy way. Maybe I anxiously attach, maybe I avoidant attach, all these things. And ultimately, I believe that comes down to, how our brain developed and around trauma. And if we don't choose to address those things at some point, it's not going to change. Right. And it's not your fault, right? Maybe you learned it incorrectly to begin with. It is your responsibility now as, hopefully a functioning adult to say, the buck stops here, right? I want to live differently. I want to have healthy attachment and an appropriate relationship. So, it's never too late to start working on that. So, that's definitely one way. If we're maybe an adult and our brain has fully developed and then we experience a trauma, whether that's a physical trauma like a brain injury or an assault or a spouse passes or, a child or something like that, that would maybe be more of that kind of PTSD style trauma. And we do have people who experience flashbacks and reactivity and panic and, all these other things. And I would argue to say that one, I doubt that you want to live that way. Right. Experiencing flashbacks and experiencing nightmares and, having all of this kind of very visceral experience of that trauma. Neurofeedback's not going to make your brain forget that. Right. And not that you would necessarily want to. Right. At this point, it's a part of your story. But rather than kind of the behavioral mentality of what do I do when that happens? Right. Okay. When I have a panic attack, what do I do? Neurofeedback's more of how do I keep from getting there in the first place, right? How do I teach my brain to not even get to that level? I hear from clients, oh my gosh, I just go from 0 to 100, right? And then I look at their brain and go, gosh, the reality is you're actually never at 0. 0 does not exist to your brain, right? You operate at a hot 80. So then when something triggers you and you jump to 100, actually the jump was this much versus if you think you're at 0, well, gosh, you think you're making a really big jump. The reality is you're probably here and this isn't a very big jump. So how do we teach your brain to operate at maybe a cool 30, maybe a cool 25? So then when something happens, it's actually going to take a whole lot more for you to get to that level of reactivity.
Because when you do experience a trauma, it keeps your body and your brain in a reactive state. So like you were saying, your baseline's always going to be 80. So that's why it's easy, like things are easily triggered and it takes that trigger, it lessens the effect of the outside stimulus that you experience because that trigger will no longer be there. It's going to lessen the amount of things that can trigger you because your brain is no longer reacting to that, is like in fight or flight mode to whatever it might be that not that you're experiencing the same traumas, but when you experience something else that triggers that fight or flight state outside of you, it's lessening your brain's ability to react to it. Is that did that make sense?
Yeah, it's teaching your brain self-regulation, if you will. Mm-hmm. So your brain has a lot more flexibility and ability to self-regulate versus kind of getting triggered and then sitting in that state, right? You should be able hey, triggers are going to happen, right? And maybe for a moment you feel that kind of flood, and then you should be able to transition back out of it. Right? Or maybe you get triggered, but not nearly at that same level versus I would say most of us have a very hard time or inability to self-regulate. So when we get triggered, when things happen, then it's game over, right? That, and we'll hear that from people, or you might hear that from friends, gosh, something happened at work 2 days ago and I'm just freaking ruminating about it. I'm still talking about the same thing. I'm still, gosh, I've been sleeping. I can't get over it. And we're going, well, why is that? Why are we still just stuck in that state? Because your brain doesn't have the ability to regulate out of it.
And so it's going to lessen the amount of ruminating thoughts that your brain will get stuck in. And because I know with like ADHD, for example, a lot of times people have a difficult time regulating your emotions. So say you'll be able to spiral in obsessive thoughts about something that happened. Say you're in a relationship, you might obsess over that person or obsess over the breakup more. Not that you shouldn't feel the feelings and be in pain, but it'll be difficult to get out of that sadness and state of depression over something. And another girl in my class, we were talking about when you're diagnosed with anxiety disorder, it's that you're always constantly, your body doesn't have a chance to come down off of being triggered, that it's in fight or flight mode, that you're just constantly being triggered all the time by things, and that keeps you in that state of anxiety. Is that it'll lessen that and take that away?
Yeah, no, you're right. We should be able to teach our brains. So especially, yeah, when people talk about my brain never shuts off, right? I'm always ruminating. My brain's always chatty. I can never get off of it. It will absolutely help you to not have to do that, right? I'm thinking of one client specifically who just had the busiest brain. And he came in one day and he goes, Angie, I went for a run today and my brain was quiet. It was the most peaceful run I've ever had. He goes, I didn't even know I had the ability to do that. I was like, yes, this was about 30 sessions in and his brain was doing what he was asking it to do, right? That he was like, hey, this is my time. I don't need to be thinking about what's going to happen at work, my marriage, my, everything. Oh my gosh, I just need like a moment of peace and a moment of calm. And his brain had been trained to the ability, it was able to regulate into this really peaceful alpha theta state that beforehand was really not even available to him.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think most people don't realize that that's not normal. I think a lot of people are just going around being stressed out and they're just used to it being in a state of constant stress or.
It is their normal.
Yeah. So this is really such interesting information. I know that you are a big advocate of mental health and speaking all over the country about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and where you visit or if you have any talks coming up soon?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a professional keynote speaker. I speak by myself and then I also speak with my business partner, Rachel, which that is just the most fun. I mean, if you're not working with your best friend, I feel like you're not doing it right. We just have the best time ever. And actually just in November, I spoke at a couple of different engagements here in Denver, but we've spoken, just all over the country. And we do talk some about, neurofeedback, but generally we're talking about brain health and mental wellness and basically ultimately how to optimize your brain. So a couple of the different, talks that we give are neurology of leadership, the neurology of the 1%. How do I get 1% better every day? What does that look like? As of right now, I actually don't have anything booked coming up, but definitely, follow us at BrainCode Centers. Our website, braincodecenters.com are great places to kind of check in on that. But that is so fun for us to just be able to kind of go and to educate. Currently, Rachel and I do 100% of the consultations for BrainCode Centers. They're 100% free. So if anyone ever wants to learn about neurofeedback and what neurofeedback can do for them, we basically schedule them a free consultation. And what's cool about our talks is that it's not like a consultation, but it can kind of give you a little taste. So when people, hear us talk, a lot of times it's like, hey, this sparked an interest. How do I learn more? That's just a really cool part of, kind of our job and ultimately our mission, that I just want to educate people and make mental health, bring so much more awareness to mental health and to brain health, that even in the last 10 years, I think that we are talking about it so much more. I think people are at a lack of options. Though, many times we think it's either meds or counseling. And those are two good options. There are other options, right? And what are those? And how do I take control of those things?
And even if you are someone that still would like to go to counseling, and neurofeedback sessions would be a great place to start, or else go hand in hand with whatever other therapies you're doing, because if you can't hurt you, and it's amazing what you've been able to do for people.
Oh, Yes, great additional modality. If you're already in talk therapy or doing EMDR or, something like that, brain spotting, neurofeedback is a great addition, to what you're doing. Or for some people, talking through their trauma can be re-traumatizing, right? So neurofeedback might be a great place to start that, hey, it's going to be less about the feelings and less about re-experiencing the trauma and more about getting your brain to a place that maybe it's not as triggering to even, touch that bear, poke that bear, right? It's really going to help regulate your brain and get you to a place where maybe that's even an option.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. And I think maybe this is even like a place that people should start, or if someone is struggling with something that they haven't been able to work out in therapy, or, maybe you've been going to therapy or you're really against therapy, this is a great place to start if, you're afraid of going to therapy and talking about it. Like you said, it could be triggering for people.
Yeah, no, and again, like I said, we do 100% free consultation. So it's just even, finding out what your options are, right? That can be a great place to start. Hey, I just want to do a consultation. I want to figure out, maybe a little bit more about what this is about. If it's a good option, absolutely.
That's perfect. And then if people want to find you, you said they can come to your website, they can go to your Instagram handle. Can you just give us all the information again?
Perfect. Yes. At BrainCode Centers is our Instagram handle. BrainCodeCenters.com is our website. My name is Angie. And then also, totally, I feel like people can feel free to email me directly, Angie at BrainCode Centers. And, either way, we'll get right back to you. That, Rachele and I are very involved with the Instagram and with the website and whatnot. So you're going to hear from us directly and we can help kind of determine what next steps are.
Perfect. And I see on your website, it's really super easy to find, schedule a consultation. So anyone who's interested can find it very easily there.
Yes.
I am so happy to meet you, Angie, and thank you so much for all this amazing information. I know that I'm super interested in doing this for my brain health and learning more about how my brain operates and how it can improve. Thank you so much for being on the Inner PD Code.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Rachele, thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time.